When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. It is important to view knowledge as sort of a semantic tree. Make sure you understand the fundamental principles, the trunk and big branches, before you get into the leaves/details, or there is nothing for them to hang on to. My proceeds from the PayPal acquisition were $180 million. I put $100 million in SpaceX, $70 million in Tesla, and $10 million in Solar City. I had to borrow money for rent. You should take the approach that you're wrong. Your goal is to be less wrong. You get paid in direct proportion to the difficulty of problems you solve. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop, where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. I think it's important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. The normal way we conduct our lives is we reason by analogy. With analogy, we are doing this because it's like something else that was done, or it is like what other people are doing. With first principles, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths, and then reason up from there. It is possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary. I think it would be great to be born on Earth and die on Mars. Just hopefully not at the point of impact. Constantly seek criticism. A well-thought-out critique of whatever you're doing is as valuable as gold. No, I don't ever give up. I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated. I'm not trying to be anyone's savior. I'm just trying to think about the future and not be sad. If you need inspiration, don't do it. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. The first step is to establish that something is possible, then probability will occur. Any product that needs a manual to work is broken. The idea of lying on a beach as my main thing just sounds like the worst. It sounds horrible to me. I would go bonkers. I would have to be on serious drugs. I'd be super duper bored. I like high intensity. I came to the conclusion that we should aspire to increase the scope and scale of human consciousness in order to better understand what questions to ask. Really, the only thing that makes sense is to strive for greater collective enlightenment. In terms of the internet, it's like humanity acquiring a collective nervous system. Whereas previously we were more like a collection of cells that communicated by diffusion. With the advent of the internet, it was suddenly like we got a nervous system. It's a hugely impactful thing. I take the position that I'm always to some degree wrong, and the aspiration is to be less wrong. One of the really tough things is figuring out what questions to ask. Once you figure out the question, then the answer is relatively easy. There needs to be an intersection of the set of people who wish to go, and the set of people who can afford to go, and that intersection of sets has to be enough to establish a self-sustaining civilization. My rough guess is that for $500,000, there are enough people that could afford to go and would want to go. But it's not going to be a vacation jaunt. It's going to be saving up all your money and selling all your stuff, like when people moved to the early American colonies. Even at 1 million people you're assuming an incredible amount of productivity per person, because you would need to recreate the entire industrial base on Mars. You would need to mine and refine all of these different materials, in a much more difficult environment than Earth. There would be no trees growing. There would be no oxygen or nitrogen that are just there. No oil. Excluding organic growth, if you could take 100 people at a time, you would need 10,000 trips to get to 1 million people. But you would also need a lot of cargo to support those people. In fact, your cargo to person ratio is going to be quite high. It would probably be 10 cargo trips for every human trip, so more like 100,000 trips. And we're talking 100,000 trips of a giant spaceship. If we can establish a Mars colony, we can almost certainly colonize the whole solar system, because we'll have created a strong economic forcing function for the improvement of space travel. We'll go to the moons of Jupiter, at least some of the outer ones for sure, and probably Titan on Saturn, and the asteroids. Once we have that forcing function, and an Earth to Mars economy, we'll cover the whole solar system. But the key is that we have to make the Mars thing work. If we're going to have any chance of sending stuff to other star systems, we need to be laser focused on becoming a multi-planet civilization. That's the next step. Constantly think about how you could be doing things better. When I was a little kid, I was really scared of the dark. But then I came to understand, dark just means the absence of photons in the visible wavelength 400 to 700 nanometers. Then I thought, well, it's really silly to be afraid of a lack of photons. Then I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore after that. One of the biggest mistakes we made was trying to automate things that are super easy for a person to do, but super hard for a robot to do. I could go and buy one of the islands in the Bahamas and turn it into my personal fiefdom, but I am much more interested in trying to build and create a new company. They were building a Ferrari for every launch, when it was possible that a Honda Accord might do the trick. You need to live in a dome initially, but over time you could terraform Mars to look like Earth and eventually walk around outside without anything on. So it's a fixer-upper of a planet. Every person in your company is a vector. Your progress is determined by the sum of all vectors. It's pretty hard to get to another star system. Alpha Centauri is 4 light-years away, so if you go at 10% of the speed of light, it's going to take you 40 years, and that's assuming you can instantly reach that speed, which isn't going to be the case. You have to accelerate. You have to build up to 20 or 30% and then slow down, assuming you want to stay at Alpha Centauri and not go zipping past. It's just hard. With current lifespans, you need generational ships. You need antimatter drives, because that's the most mass efficient. It's doable, but it's super slow. I would like to die on Mars. Just not on impact. If you buy a ticket to hell, it isn't fair to blame hell. The idea of lying on a beach as my main thing just sounds like the worst. It sounds horrible to me. I would go bonkers. I would have to be on serious drugs. I'd be super duper bored. I like high intensity. I really like computer games, but then if I made really great computer games, how much effect would that have on the world? I'm not trying to be anyone's savior. I just try to think about the future and not be sad. I think we have a duty to maintain the light of consciousness, to make sure it continues into the future. Life needs to be more than just solving problems every day. You need to wake up and be excited about the future. I was raised by books, and then my parents. If you're not concerned about AI safety, you should be. Vastly more risk than North Korea. If humanity is to become multiplanetary, the fundamental breakthrough that needs to occur in rocketry is a rapidly and completely reusable rocket. Achieving it would be on a par with what the Wright brothers did. It's the fundamental thing that's necessary for humanity to become a spacefaring civilization. America would never have been colonized if ships weren't reusable. My children didn't choose to be born. I chose to have children. They owe me nothing, I owe them everything. Science is discovering the essential truths about what exists in the universe, engineering is about creating things that never existed. America is the spirit of human exploration distilled. Don't confuse schooling with education. I didn't go to Harvard, but the people that work for me did. If something is important enough, you do it even if the odds aren't in your favor. Whatever area that you get into, given that, even if you're the best of the best, there's always a chance of failure. So, I think it's important that you really like whatever you're doing. If you don't like it, life is too short. And also, if you like what you're doing, you think about it even when you're not working. It's something your mind drawn to. And if you don't like it, you just really can't make it work, I think. When I was a child, there's one thing I said: I never want to be alone. That's what I would say. If something is important enough, you should try even if the probable outcome is failure. If you punish people too much for failure, then they will respond accordingly and the innovation you will get will be very incrementalist. Nobody's going to try anything bold for fear of getting fired or punished in some way. The risk/reward must be balanced, in favor of making bold moves. When something is important enough, you should try even if the probable outcome is failure. Working hard to make useful products and services for your fellow humans is deeply morally good. Education is basically downloading data and algorithms into your brain. Never chase the next hot thing. Stop trying to chase the wave. You will never catch it. You always, for the most part, find out about that stuff too late. Instead, do what you are really passionate about, what you really love. That will position you before the wave even hits, and you will find out about whatever it is before the wave starts, before it gets hot, and that is how you take advantage. There have to be reasons that you get up in the morning and you want to live. Why do you want to live? What's the point? What inspires you? What do you love about the future? I think that's the single best piece of advice. Constantly think about how you could be doing things better and questioning yourself. When something is important enough, you do it, even if the odds are not in your favor. Excessive use of made-up acronyms is a significant impediment to communication. No one can actually remember all these acronyms, and people don't want to seem dumb in a meeting, so they just sit there in ignorance. This is particularly tough on new employees. If you're trying to create a company, it's like baking a cake. You have to have all the ingredients in the right proportion. Stop being patient and start asking yourself, how do I accomplish my 10-year plan in 6 months? You will probably fail, but you will be a lot further ahead of the person who simply accepted it was going to take 10 years. I wonder how many dead one-planet civilizations are out there in the cosmos that never made it to the other planet and ultimately extinguished themselves or were destroyed by external factors. Probably a few. I want to die on Mars, just not on impact. One of the really tough things is figuring out what questions to ask. Once you figure out the question, then the answer is relatively easy. I mean, I think that if people are concerned about volatility, they should definitely not buy our stock. I'm not here, on an earnings call, to convince you to buy Tesla stock. Do not buy it if volatility is scary. There you go. The most entertaining outcome is the most likely. Buy and hold stock in companies where you love the product roadmap, sell where you don't. Pronouns suck. With automation comes abundance. The only thing that makes sense to do is strive for greater collective enlightenment. I want to die on Mars, just not on impact.